Looks like you're ready. Click here to start. So I click on that and go live. And check volume over here. Yes, that one's working. And then check Safari. That shows the time lag. The Safari hasn't started showing yet. And there it goes. Looks like you're ready. Click here to start. So I click on that. Yep, both of those show we're going. Okay, so this is part 2 of building this custom gaming PC. It's going to be used for flight simulator for a friend of mine who runs a program for training young people to prepare for careers in aviation, pilots specifically. So the first part was sometime in January, I think 5 or 6 weeks ago. And what happened is that the display adapter that I had was the wrong one. It was 3 panels wide instead of 2 panels. So this one should do the job for us. I had ordered the parts based upon what we thought was used in a prior build, but apparently somewhere in the translation that got mixed up. And I also since realized that the fans that were on the list just weren't going to work. And so I got, they were 80 millimeter fans, and so I bought a couple of 120 millimeter fans, which will fit better in this case. But after looking the parts over a bit, I don't think it's even going to be needed. So I'll talk more about that when we get there. I've been reviewing the parts a little bit and thinking through the procedure, and I had mentioned in the first video that it's been a long time since I built the computer. When I first started my business, I was building clone computers. They were not high-end gaming PCs, and that would have been 1992, 93, 94, somewhere around there. And it just became apparent that there's not enough margin in building clone PCs to make it worthwhile. So then I just started buying pre-manufactured computers for my clients. So for this purpose, we need a custom-built computer, and we wanted it in this mini case. So it's a tiny little case. It's a tiny little motherboard. The motherboard's already in there. We did that during the first video. And I've got the setup a little bit different on the desk. This is what I call camera 1 that you're looking through right now, and there's what I call camera 3. It's on the tripod on the other side of my desk, and then this camera is up close. And so the cameras you just saw, was one of them was this one right here, and camera 2 is over there on a tripod. So as I was looking through this a little bit, I think I realized there were a couple things that I was headed down the wrong path with. And so I'm going to hopefully correct those in the right way. And where do I want to start? Now, I looked up through the manual a little bit for the case, and it implied that the motherboard should be prepared before putting it into the computer, including the CPU and the CPU fan. And the reason why I didn't do that is because, let's see how I can show you here, is I've got to put in this riser for the display adapter board. It goes in here, and then the graphics card will reside out here in a horizontal fashion. And there's these 3 screws. Let's see, I should be on this camera, I think. Yeah, these 3 screws to screw into there, and I thought that once the CPU and the CPU fan are here, I'm not going to be able to get to those screws. So I thought I ought to deal with this riser board before I deal with the CPU, and I had to put the motherboard in before I could deal with the riser board. And then I've also discovered that I think I've got these wires wrong. I've got these plugged directly onto the motherboard, and I was looking through the parts. I found this little pigtail adapter that looks like this piece will plug onto the header on the motherboard, and then these will receive each of those connector wires. So there's reset switch, power switch, hard drive LED, and power LED. Well, the hard drive LED I don't think I'll be using because this has an NVMe M.2 SSD that's mounted directly on the motherboard. So the motherboard's going to be able to sense the hard drive activity. So I'm going to pull these off. The connectors that I had on there was for power switch, power LED. Let's see if I can hold these right. Power switch, power LED. Is that 2 power LEDs? Oh, power LED minus and power LED plus. So I think those would have worked fine being plugged directly into the motherboard. I'm sure they would have. But plugging this one in is going to give me a better assurance that I've got them connected right, because this can go only one direction. Now let's see, how good of a view can I give you? So there's the pins. And the sweet thing about the way these connectors are keyed is there's only one place they can go. There's only one set of pins that matches the configuration of this connector, meaning it's got 9 sockets and one of those is, and the 10th one is blocked. So there's only one place that can go. As I was putting those individual wires onto the motherboard, I was uncertain, and I had to be rather careful as to whether I was putting them in correctly. It's pretty stiff to push down. So, yep, I got it down to where it feels good and solid. All right, so then I'll just connect these connectors to that pigtail. Let's go to this camera. So it's got female connectors coming from that pigtail, and they're all labeled. Power LED plus and minus. Oh, this is actually coming from the header on the computer. Then these are from the pigtail. So hard drive LED. There's power LED. I don't know which is positive and which is negative, and I'm suspecting it doesn't matter because it's just an LED. It just needs a positive side and a negative side. Oh yes, I can tell. See the red wire? And I've got it correctly. It works. And then for power switch, here this one's labeled power switch from the pigtail, and this is the power switch from the case header. All right, got those. And what we got here? Hard drive LED, not going to need that one because this has an NVMe SSD drive, and then a reset switch. So do I have wires for a reset switch? At the moment I don't see that, and I'm not too concerned about it on the case. Let's see, so this is the front side. Ah, that looks like a reset switch. No, it's a power switch. It's labeled as PSD. So I'm thinking this case doesn't have a reset switch. So later on I'll close up or protect those pins so that they don't accidentally short out somewhere. All right. So now I'm thinking I want to go for this riser next. Nope, wrong way. Okay, so then I need 3 screws in there. Now what am I going after next before I screw that in? I think next I'm going to go for the CPU and the CPU cooler. And it looks to me like it can be mounted with the motherboard already in place, because I already took a peek at the CPU fan and how it mounts, and it looks like it'll work from one side. I was thinking that I might be having to pull the motherboard back out, but I don't think so. And then after the CPU, I'll put in the RAM memory. I'm not going to need any SATA drive connections because, again, we're using the NVMe mounted on the motherboard. So let's go ahead and do those screws. Slight differences between these screws. This one I think is actually the wrong screw. It has the right thread, but it has a different head on it. All right, so the display adapter is going to go in over on this side approximately like that. Not ready to put that in yet. In part because there's still the possibility that I might have to take the motherboard out still. So here's the CPU. There's the CPU over here. And then inside here is the heat sink and fan. And this heat sink has thermal compound already applied to it. And there's no plastic film over it. So that'll just mount right on top of the CPU. And this, rather than screws, it's got this plastic fastener, gizmo, gadget, whatever it might be called, and goes into those holes. So that's why I say that it looks like it can be mounted from the top side of the motherboard. So you can see with that in place, that would have been very difficult to get to this screw down here. And it still would have been okay for getting to those wires to connect to the header. So I'm being careful to not touch that thermal compound. All right, so I'll pop the cover off of the CPU socket. Actually, I said that wrong. Don't pop that off yet. Put the CPU in the socket, and then when I clamp down on it, that cover will pop off on its own. Let's see, so I'm going to change this camera angle a little bit. Here's the CPU inside its plastic case. I'm looking at the, I'm going to call them pins, but they're not really pins. The bottom side of the CPU to consider orientation. In which way do I turn it? The writing on this CPU, you can see there Intel, or maybe you can't see. Hard to turn that, there you can see it. So that should go the same direction as the writing on the motherboard. And, oh, that's upside down. Got to read the writing on the motherboard to determine which way it is. So I think it's going to go that direction. And I'd like to see something, comparison between the CPU and the socket to confirm that direction. So I'm seeing a few things. I'm noticing this void right there would match up with this void. This void here would match up with that void. This void would match up with that. And they're not quite symmetrical. And then this void right there, I don't really see a corresponding mark there. Looking at the corners, you can see those contact points have different shapes on each corner. This is a much smaller corner than that one. So that small corner would be over here. And yeah, that seems to correspond. I'm going to try getting more light on it. Not sure if this light's going to help us or hurt. That's pretty bright. I should be able to feel it. Oh boy, that's completely wrong. Nope, that's completely wrong. Some of you already noticed that, I'm sure. The center rectangle. The center rectangle right here does not correspond to that rectangle. Not if I'm going to keep the writing in the same orientation as the motherboard. Yeah, that's not right at all. Looks to me like should be this way so that that rectangle corresponds to that rectangle. Now let's consider those corners and voids or something else that corresponds. Oh, I see a good correspondence. Over on this side of the CPU, there's an extra row of contacts right here where it does a little jog there. And that corresponds to this area in the socket. Looks like there's somebody watching over the live stream. If you want to type hello in the chat, I'd love to see who that is. Okay, then over here, similar area of contacts that looks to match the CPU socket. Now that does not make the writing on the CPU match the writing on the motherboard, but it does match the writing on this cover. Beautiful. That's the ticket. That's good enough to satisfy me. All right. So open this guy up. There's notches for your fingers right in here, so I can avoid touching the top surface of the CPU. And I'm paying attention to the writing on the CPU and see that I need to turn it this direction. And then the CPU has an arrow on this side, which should be corresponding with something. Oh, there is a definitive. Right here, there's a notch on the socket that's matched by a notch in the CPU frame, and the same exists over here. So there's no way that CPU could turn 180 degrees or 90 degrees in either direction. All right, so now I set the lid down, pull this back a little bit so that this notch will fit under the shoulder of that screw right there, and then close the lever and the cover will pop off. There's the cover popped off. And I pull this spring clip off to the side and then under that notch, and then take the cover off. This cover needs to be stored somewhere safe in case the CPU needs to be removed and maybe ship the motherboard back for warranty replacement or something along those lines. And I think what I'm going to do is probably tape it inside the case somewhere. All right. So next, probably the CPU fan. There's the power wire for it here. I'll get that freed from the CPU blades, CPU fan blades. All right, so this is going to mount down this direction, and it probably can be turned any direction, but I'm going to start by considering it with the label the same direction as the CPU, writing in the same direction, and then consider where is the power connection for the fan, and it's right out here on this side, so that looks perfect. Very nice. All right, I'm looking at how these fasteners work. It strikes me that once I set these down into the holes and put a little pressure on them, that these pins will push down and then they'll need to turn, and there's an arrow on the head of these fasteners. There's a curved arrow with a 90-degree arc, and the arrowhead is on the left of this, right at the tip of my screwdriver. There you go. There you go. You see that? So that's going to be the direction that this needs to turn. And it makes sense if you look at that slot right there. If you consider putting a flat-bladed screwdriver in there, the only way you could turn it is to the left. Because if you try turning it to the right, the bottom part of your blade is going to come out this direction, which I suppose you still have to be able to do to remove it. All right, now remember the thermal compound is already on the heat sink. And I'll just set it down into those holes. Now this is the heat sink. I'm going to take a look at the manual there now that I have a focus on what that looks like and see what clue I get from it. So it shows putting the heatsink fan down into those holes. Step 7 and 8. And here's showing a 90-degree, that shows 90 degrees right there. And it's showing the turn counterclockwise. And they'll all be counterclockwise, yes. So fastening it is counterclockwise. This is removal instructions. This is labeled install, right up here. It does not indicate any turning. Maybe it's just pressing it down. Okay. Okay, I heard some snaps. Felt like a ratchet type of action. Well, that felt pretty good and easy. So turning them counterclockwise would release them. That was quite easy. Would have been a lot faster if I already knew how to do it. All right, so the power for the CPU fan would be one of these two, and I think there's labels on the motherboard to show which of those I should be using. I'm try to put some light on that. Different method. That is motherboard. There's power connectors. Here's a good illustration. Yeah. Looks like number 4. All right, number 4 on the right hand page says CPU and chassis fan connectors, 4-pin CPU fan, 4-pin chassis fan, 4-pin AIO pump. They're all labeled as number 4. And I see the illustration on the left. If you see number 4 near the top there, it's pointed to these 3 connectors, and little tiny letters underneath. They're labeled on the leftmost one CHA fan for case, the middle one is CPU fan, and the third one is AIO pump. So it's going to be the middle of those 3. So that means this one. Boom. All right. Where do I want to go next? this connector here comes from the USB ports on the front of the case over here on this header. There's only one place that it can fit. And I think I had previously connected this, and then I took it out because I just thought when it came time for cable management, it was going to be easier to have it disconnected. So I may still wind up reconnecting it. Now this one is keyed. Right here there's a notch that fits into a socket. It's right down here. Actually, you can see the notch right here. Pretty firm pressure to get it in. Still not all the way down. Curious the way it shaped and fits in there. It's not really clear that it's all the way in or not. So from this angle I can watch as that notch goes down into the slot. Yeah, that's all the way down. Just the shoulder of the connector doesn't meet at the top of that header, so it's a little ambiguous. All right, then these connectors out here, the SATA drive connector is not going to be using. This connector, I don't think we're going to be using. I'm not quite sure what it is, and there's a slide switch. So I'd like to find out what those items are. So go back to that diagram in the motherboard manual. Let's see, how about if I turn that light off, slide that off this way, and those drive connectors are right here. So number 11 is that one that I don't recognize. Number 11 is USB 3.1 Gen 2 connector. So that would only be utilized if this case has a USB 3.1, and I don't think the case does, no, but I think one of these USB ports on the motherboard that are out here on the back probably are. So the bottom line there is that I'm not going to be using that header for anything. All right, I also want to know what this one is over here to see if I'm going to need to get to that. Here's the PCI socket. So the one that I'm asking about is here, number 19. And there's speaker. That is also not, I don't have anything connected to yet. And that one is number 20. So 19 and 20. 20 confirmed as speaker connector, which I don't think we need because we got a sound board. We're not going to need an internal speaker like to do a beep code. So I don't think we'll be using that. And then that one is a USB 2.0 connector on number 19. Is that the only USB 2.0? Right, but I don't need that because, right, I don't need that because we have a different wire that connects the USB 2.0. So here's the USB 2.0 ports here. They come through on this wire, and that's that one that I just connected. So we're not going to be using that header for USB 2.0. What was that slide switch for? I'm guessing it might have to do with wiping out or resetting CMOS maybe? Looks like there's somebody watching the live stream. If you want to say hello in the chat, I'll say hi back to you. Or just watch. My channel's still pretty young, so I don't get many people watching during a live stream. Then let's see, the one that I'm looking for now. Oh, the switch. All right, it's over here. It looks like number 10. Number 10. Memory OK button. Memory OK 2 button. Looks like a switch to me. That guy right there, it has an on position and an off position. back and find that part, that place in the motherboard manual again. All right, I gotta get my cheaters. Guess I'm already wearing glasses, but Robert Timmons, hello, welcome aboard. Hey Robert, is the audio and video coming through okay? All right, so I can see when I look with these magnifiers in the manual, really tiny, says mem OK underscore II, and in the off position it says mem OK II LED. So that sounds like it's an LED to specify that memory is okay, perhaps. Let's see if I can show that to you. It's really, really tiny. Okay, number 10 in that diagram, little tiny lettering right there. So it tells me that. Ay caramba. So I'm going to leave that in the on position. Let's see. So Info for Anything is asking me, am I a gamer? No, I'm not a gamer. I'm a computer consultant. I have not built a computer since the early days of my business around 1992 through 94, 95. I built clone computers for business offices, not for gaming. This computer I'm building for a friend of mine. His name is Joseph, and he runs a aviation. Oh, geez, I'm drawing New Vision Aviation. And what they do is they have the computers just like this one that somebody else built, set up in public schools in 4 or 5 different school districts in our area. So he's got a total of 4 or 5 simulators out there, and this is another one. It's going to be used for flight simulator to help prepare kids from disadvantaged neighborhoods, to prepare them for a career as a pilot. And that's their program. They also, New Vision Aviation, they have 4 electric airplanes, real airplanes. 2 people get in them and you fly, electric powered, not gas powered. And it's the first in the country, and actually we think it's the first in the world to set it up as a training facility so that they can train pilots in electric aircraft. All right, so what I'm doing here is I had a video that I did in January where I started this build, and then I got interrupted because I had the wrong display adapter. I had ordered the parts based upon what I had been told was used before, and the video adapter was 3 expansion ports wide, and this case only has 2 expansion ports available, so they obviously had the wrong part listed. So now I got the right part, and I'm trying to finish up this build. So I've also never tried to do videos of a build, obviously, because I haven't built a computer in a long, long time. All right, so get my head back in the game. So I've looked at all of the connections on the motherboard to figure out what else I'm going to need. And I'm going to go ahead and install the memory now. What does this tell us? 16 gigabytes. It's 2 8-gigabyte boards. And this configuration was specified. So I didn't choose what processor and memory was going to be used, but a company that has a customized software that runs on top of Microsoft Simulator for the purpose of providing primary flight training to flight students. And so this is not perhaps the same choices that a gamer might choose, but it works well for the flight simulator and keeps within a more modest budget. All right, so I've got that backwards. Just looking at the notch on the memory and where it lines up with the socket. Still trying to get these cameras reasonably lined up so that you can see what's going on. So these memory sockets, the right hand side is static. It does not clip. The left hand side clips. So get it started, press it down to the point to where that clip automatically closes, and then do the next one. So let's see, which one of you asked info for anything? You asked if I was a gamer, so that kind of implies to me that you might not have already been aware of my channel and what my primary focus is on my channel. So I'm curious if you don't mind telling me, how did you find me today? Since I am a young channel, I'm interested in knowing that. Okay, memory. That's going to go through there. That comes later. And I think I have one more power connector I need to get in place. Let me check that. Where's this one at? Yeah, this one over here, number 1. ATX Power Connectors. I think I need that one, and I think it's this one. I think it's this one. Labeled CPU on both ends. Let's see if that fits. Does. Then it'll come over to plug into the back of the power supply. Oh yeah, I was looking at this earlier. I think I'm going to need to unplug some of the connectors on the back of this power supply so that I can get to the ones on the bottom row. So these two clips here, I'll depress them and pull those connectors out. Alright, I'm going to move this light a little bit and you'll be able to see that one of the ports on the power supply is labeled CPU. And you're looking at it upside down, so right there, upside down it says CPU. So that matches with this one that says CPU, and these two pieces connect to each other. Well, they don't connect to each other, but they go in side by side. Oh, wait a minute, that's not going to work. That's not going to work because there's only one notch in the center of that for the clip. And this twin clip has a clip on each of these connectors. So I think I could turn this cable around the other way. Take this one off of here. Robert Timmons says, I got your channel from watching Kerry Holzman. He mentioned you in one of his live streams. I enjoy Kerry Holzman a lot, and he was pretty much my inspiration for realizing that I could do live videos and not have to do all the editing crap. Excuse me using that technical term. But my work is mostly with helping people with their computer issues and providing training. And I do that through Zoom and connecting remotely to their computers. That's the intention of what my channel is going to be. But because my channel is very young, those requests are coming in very, very slow. Pretty much all of what they've been so far is people that know me in real life. And there's been a healthy number of them, but I'd sure like to get some people that are outside of my real life contacts. Okay, so now these two twin clips, plugs, look like they're going to go side by side in here. And there's a notch that is wide enough so that both of them can clip onto that. All right, then come back here and reconnect these power connectors to the power supply. Alright, so earlier I said that I had checked all of the motherboard connectors and was satisfied that I had used all the ones that I needed, and then I found that extra one, and that one would have prevented the computer from turning on. So I'm taking another check. So these are fan connectors. I looked that up in the manual and confirmed that this one is for the CPU fan. This one is for a chassis fan, which I'm actually not going to be using any chassis fans. They were prescribed for this build, but I don't think it makes sense to use them. So when I get to that point, I'll describe and show why I think I don't need them. This one was for a I think it's a water cooler fan. And then here, well, that's another case fan. Oh no, here's AIO pump. That would be the water cooler. Okay. So I've considered all of those connectors. I've considered all of the connectors back here. I've considered those two connectors. They're SATA connections. We're not going to have any SATA drives. And there's some more pins out this way. There's one for a set of pins for speakers. There are 4 pins. And this case isn't going to have an internal speaker, so we'll be connecting through the sound, right here, through the sound output of the motherboard's audio adapter circuitry. And then what is that set of pins for? All right, go back to the book. So my screen says there's 6 concurrent viewers. I think one of those is me. If somebody else has shown up, I invite you to say hello in the chat window. And let's see, I'm looking for that one that is here. Number 17, nope, number 19. Oh, I already looked at that. That was the USB 2.0 connector from the case, which I don't need that because I've got this other connector for the USB 2.0 connections. So I've considered all the connectors on the motherboard and have everything. So next, I think we're ready to go look at the graphics adapter area. So the way this mini motherboard works, it has a riser up here that provides a socket connection here, and then this is kind of an extender to that socket. The graphics card is going to be plugging into here. This extension edge connector plugs into that riser like so. All right, then here's the graphics adapter. Are we better on this camera? And it's got a plastic cover over it. It says remove protective film before use. Doesn't actually cover the fans. And it's got a protective cover for the edge connector. So pull that off. And let's see where we get a good view here. Whoops, I got one more thing I need to do before I can put that in. So I'll set this off to the side. And here I've got the covers for the expansion ports. Got to take those off. So let's see, I see in the chat, Robert Timmons, info for anything, and Mike Perodin. I think Mike and Robert, I think I've seen both of you before in the chat window. I'm certain for Mike Perodin. Robert, I've seen your name before, right? Oh, and I see your comment that the sound and video is coming over good. Okay, so this is just a test fit now. All right, and I'm not quite right yet. And that's because this brace right here, or support, is too far in that way. So I need to slide it out this direction. And that's got a couple of screws that are accessed from the bottom. Right here. I think just loosen those up, slide this back, and maybe I'll just snug it up enough so that I can slide it in with friction. Okay, now let's try test fitting this again. I feel like it's giving me a little resistance back here where these expansion cards are trying to go through, trying to weave through this area where it looks like there's a little bent metal tab that it's got to go through just the right way. Maybe this camera shows that. Not really. There, that was a good sensation. All right, so the edge connector is completely inside that socket. Pull it out a little bit that you can see a little bit of the edge connector there, so it's fully seated. The screws are going to fit fine. Here's that support. Push it into the right position. Here's a power connector. Now, this opening here and this opening here are designed for fans. And the original fans that were prescribed for this were 80mm fans. And I just didn't see any way that they were going to work at all. This was the 80mm fan. And this is the larger 120mm fan. So that's the small one. This is the large one. Go figure. The box sizes don't support that, do they? So here's the 120mm fan that came in this box, and it fits nicely in that area, and the screw holes will fit fine. The 80mm fans that were prescribed for this in this big box are actually little fans, and I just couldn't see any way to make that work at all. Now, earlier today, before starting the video, I was looking things over more, and I don't see a reason to put additional fans in anyway, because let's see which camera I want to do this. The display adapter has two fans of its own, and they're going to be drawing air in through here. And the display adapter has cooling fins out this side and out this side. So the air that's coming in is going to be going out both of those directions. The case is going to be channeling that air towards exit locations, which would be that direction, because the top here is solid. And the CPU fan is going to be drawing air down through the CPU. And the power supply fan is going to be drawing air down through here. So there's enough space between this fan and the case so that it will exhaust air out through here. So the way we're set up, air is going to go in through this direction, through the CPU, through the graphics adapter, and circulate through the case. Now if I put an additional fan here, that's blowing an extra air through here. I just don't see that that's needed, but perhaps one here. This would be fine right here, because that's going to give higher pressure inside the case. You know what, I think I'm growing fond of that. But putting one here feels like overkill, doesn't it? And the other thing about putting a fan here is that this power cable is kind of awkward, because the fan would be, this power cable is just not going to go around a fan. So let's try putting one there. I'm going to take the graphics adapter back out. And conveniently it came out with this extension. All right. So here's that fan. So we're going to want to draw air in, and that's going to mean this side goes down, and have the power cable headed out towards the direction that it needs to connect to the motherboard. So that looks fine. So now let's take a look at what a fan would look like over here. Oh, see, this support can't even be here. In order to put a fan here, this support has to go away. So it appears to me that the intention is that if you're going to use a graphics adapter, the graphics adapter is going to have its own fans, so there's no need to have a fan in this location. So that's why this support prevents you from putting a fan in this area. All right, I'll buy that. Now, where did I see those screws? There they are. These screws for a fan are self-tapping screws. They have a very unique appearance to them, and I've seen some people complain about these screws. And you gave us fans that don't have threaded holes and screws that strip real easy, and the way case fans were designed even back when I was building clone computers 1992 through 95. Actually, I guess I started 1990 because I was doing that for a company I worked for. The fans would come with no threads in that plastic hole right there. If you look in that plastic hole, there's no threads. It's just a plastic hole. And these screws have very sharp threads. So they're designed to cut threads into the plastic as you screw them in. And this head has a very thin kind of knife edge to it. All right. Now, what camera am I going to use to screw these in? I think I could do it that way. So I've got a magnetized screwdriver, and I use a magnet periodically to strengthen the magnetism. It feels a little weak to me right now. So stand it up this way. Oh, I've got that backwards. Got that fan upside down. The way I recognize which direction a fan is pulling air through is that I'm a pilot, I'm a private pilot, and I know very well the shape of my propeller blades. And it's very easy for me to see when I look at the shape of a computer fan blade to know which way it's going to conduct air. This is kind of klutzy. That's weak magnetism. Well, let's see, I'm seeing 5 concurrent viewers, so one of those is me. That implies there's 4 of you out there, and it dawns on me that in this video I'm kind of farther away from my microphone than I am usually. So let me get your opinion about the sound quality. Does it kind of have that echo room or tinny empty room kind of sound to you, or does it sound acceptable? I really need a fatter handle on the screwdriver for that. I'm going to see if I have one over here. I do not. I'll just crank on it, strengthen my wrist. All right. That will work. And Robert, I see you say it does have an echo, but not bad, and I am wearing earbud. Thank you for that. I've toyed around with different places for my microphone. I'll show you what I've... Let's see. It's up there on that tripod behind my monitors. When it's touching the frame of my desk, it gets a buzz sound. I think it's from my Mac and the two microcomputers I have screwed onto the back of my desk. I had another idea of actually hanging it from the wall, from the ceiling, so that I could get it more directly overhead, get a better sound quality. Tried a couple different microphones too. All right, so then I want to get to one of these fan connections on the back side. And it'll work on either of those black ones. I think those are both labeled as case fans or chassis fans. Yeah. Chassis fan, CPU fan, and AIO pump. So actually only one of those labeled as chassis fan. It's the one over on this side. Right there, rather than that one. Okay. Alright, chassis fan in place. I think I'm ready for the final placement of the graphics adapter. Then we're getting pretty close to turning it on. I plan today just to get to the point of being able to turn on and get into the system setup. I don't intend to install Windows today because my capture device is not set up currently for the video output that this computer is going to have, so I'm going to want to change that, and that involves a restart of my streaming computer. So I figured that'll probably just make a good breaking point. And then also, after I get before installing Windows, I'll do a BIOS update and be able to include that in a video, but that's not today. Today I just want to power it on and get into the system setup program. So that might not be much longer, the way this is feeling. All right, let's put screws in. Is that better without that light? Yeah. And I'll tighten up the screws on that graphics adapter support. By Joe, I think we've got a computer. Looking over at the parts to see if I've missed anything. Motherboard, CPU, RAM, NVMe drive mounted on the motherboard, cables. So my intention is to see it fire up. I'm not going to do cable management until after I install Windows. And then put the case back together. And so here we've got a power cable. Now this is interesting, the way that this power goes. Here's the power supply over here. And there's a cable, power cable connected there that runs through the case over here and then comes out the back of the case so that you plug a power cable right there. Alright, and I'm going to need a monitor. Which monitor am I going to use? I'm going to have to get up and walk around a little bit because I didn't plan for that. And I've got power strips mounted along the back side of each 3 sides of this desk. And those power outlets are almost full. That's what, about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 outlets on each of these strips, and this strip only has 2 open ports. So now this monitor, what does it use? It's already connected to 2 computers. That monitor does DVI. That graphics adapter has a DVI port that prohibits a certain type of DVI cable. The kind that does VGA. Ah, here's one that'll work. See if I can stretch this across. I guess you didn't see which one I was going for, did you? I can show it to you here. It's that monitor. Going to connect to. Do that right here. And then keyboard, mouse. plug the power in. All right, I think I've got it all now. So connected to power, video, keyboard, mouse. The NVMe drive on the motherboard is brand new, so it won't have anything on it. Oh, we got a bunch of pretty colors. Where do I show you that? You're starting to see it. Maybe I can turn this way easier. Oh, those LEDs are built into the bottom of the motherboard. All of that RGB going on right now. Here you can see it. There you can see the LEDs on the bottom of the motherboard, doing different patterns. You know what, I think I'm going to just leave the computer right there on that angle when I turn it on. Well, okay, if I can figure out where the on button is. I'm really getting myself tangled in a bunch of cables here. Pretty sure that's going to be the on button right there. And do I have power on the monitor? Not yet. And if I got the case standing up like that, you can't see that monitor over there. There you go. All right, power on. Fan spinning, graphics fan, case fan spinning. The RGB doing kind of the same stuff that it was doing. We're waiting to see something on that monitor. I've got the num lock on the keyboard responds and the caps lock key on the keyboard responds. I'm suspecting this monitor is not picking up the DVI signal. Let's turn it off and on. It's scanning DVI and VGA and saying no signal. I'll go check the cable on the monitor. Disconnect the monitor from the VGA computer, just to prevent that possible confusion. Monitor has power, that's obvious. Oh, only one of the video card fans are spinning, and I think I just realized that I never did connect the power to the graphics adapter, and that is the case. So turning it off, power button, press and release, the power went off. Unplugging power from the computer, and the RGB just went out. And I'll show you what I forgot to do. Right here there's a power connector for the graphics adapter. The graphics adapter only had one fan turning. I remember going towards that at one point, and then I don't know what happened. I got distracted or what? I can see a connection for peripheral and for SATA. I don't see one marked for graphics adapter yet, so I think it's underneath. I think it's underneath one of these. So I'll pull those out again. Yep, there's a port that is marked two ports, one marked VGA1 and the other marked VGA2. Let me get you close enough to see those. Yeah. Right down here. That says VGA1 upside down, and that says VGA2 upside down. So we only have one graphics adapter. So then I want to find a cable for that. This is labeled EVGA. A little bit stylized. Okay, on the edge of it says VGA. So it looks like there's one end that would connect to, who's calling me? Well, I have to call her back. So I'm thinking this end connects to the power supply, and this end has two connectors in the event that you had two graphics adapters. I prefer to use a cable that only has one in order to reduce the clutter, but that is not an option that's available. So run through that opening, turn it over so it's oriented correctly, push that in, and then reconnect these two. And that one. So there's all of those. And then I'm inclined to connect this one into the graphics adapter because it's just going to feel better for cable management. There we go. Okay, as soon as I connect power, those RGB lights are active. And how do I want to set this? I kind of like being able to see the fans of the graphics adapter, what their status is. I'll just lift it up for that. I'm going to leave it sitting right there like that. All right, so we got that monitor we're looking for. Leave that camera there. And power on. Okay, the power supply fan turned a little bit and then stopped. Both graphics adapter fans are running. I've got a logo over here, and there is UEFI BIOS utility. That is a successful day. All right, if there's any questions in the chat, this is the time for that. I'm about to sign off. And then tomorrow, I expect to probably do 10 a.m. Pacific time or 2 p.m. Pacific time to do BIOS update and Windows 10 installation. And that's probably going to be a wrap for this. Put the case back together. There's some other unusual things about how this case goes together. And my channel, the intent of my channel is to provide free computer support to people through Zoom and through YouTube live streaming. It's going to be very rare for me to build a computer. And this one I'm essentially doing as a favor for my friend Joseph, running the New Vision Aviation program. And I think if you just do a Google search, you'll find their website. Joseph and I were the first to fly one of the electric airplanes in the United States that were manufactured. So anyway, that's enough of that. If you or somebody you know is interested in reaching out to me to get a free computer support session, they can send an email to me, DougBetts@LiveWindowsTraining.com. Give me an idea in the body of the email what you'd like help with, and we'll put it together. All right, so I hope this was useful to you. Have a great day. Catch you later. Goodbye.